Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. So in our last video we just got started with Python, so downloaded all the stuff, downloaded Python, downloaded Visual Studio Code, and just saw how can we create a conda environment, how to link it with GitHub, and just got introduced to writing a program in Python and running it. But now we would slowly like to build up on our concepts, and slowly we try to understand how can we do a bit more complex things. So in today's videos we will understand the control flow and conditional statement. So it's like in a certain program you want to do different kinds of things, right? So let's say if something is true, do this, else do something else. So for example, let's say you are detecting a signal or something like that, and if the signal goes above a threshold, then print out a warning or something like that. So you would like to make these complex arguments or complex control flow. So in our today's video, we will understand the basics of the if else statement. So I'd just like to start with the basic pipeline that we do. So first, we want to go to the terminal wherever we want to start our file, and then then start the conda environment that we had created in the last tutorial, and then write our code on inside that conda environment. So let me get started. So this is where I want to start, right? The Python tutorial folder. So normally I just open my terminal in there, and then I would first like to just start my conda environment. So first I'll just check what are the conda environment that I have. Okay, so conda environment list. And I think this is the tutorial one is the conda environment that we created in our last tutorial. So I will just activate that conda environment. So conda activate tutorial one. Okay, so now we are inside this particular environment. So whatever packages we install, whatever things we do will be inside this particular environment. And from here, I would like to launch Visual Studio. And the way we do it is like just write code dot. And we saw in our last video how to set it up. So if I press this, then it will open Visual Studio Code inside this particular Python tutorial folder, right? So these are the files that we had worked with in our last video. So in today's video, I would just like to create a new file and then start on top of it. So as I said last time that normally when you start writing a code, you're just trying different codes. Then I normally just do it in a Jupyter notebook. And then when I have my finalized codes, then I just put it inside a .py file and organize it better there. So for today's video, so let's me just make a new file. So tutorial, let's say 2, and I want it as a Jupyter notebook, so .ipynb. Okay, so this is a Jupyter notebook, and we can run different cells in this, and I can select a kernel, and this is the environment that we had. So it was tutorial 1, so I would just go and check for tutorial 1, so I'll be inside that particular environment. Okay, so today what we want to do is we want to understand if else. So how does it work? So it's quite simple that if something is true, then do this, else do something else. So for example, so I will just write the basic condition here first. So if, and then you check for a condition, and if that condition is true, then you execute this block of code. Okay, so this is the basic structure that we want to follow. Okay, so just to start with an example, so let's say we have a number. Okay, so number is 5, and we want to check if this number is positive or not. So if this number is greater than 0 or not. So the way we do it is you just write the if statement. So if the number that we have, so if the number is greater than 0, then what do we do? Then print that the number is positive. Okay, print the number is positive. So that's it. So if your number 5 is greater than 0, so here it checks if this number is greater than 0, and if it is greater than 0, so it will return true, and your this statement will be executed, right? So if we run this, then the number is positive. So you can enter different numbers here. So let's say I just enter whatever 55, 555, then it should still print this thing, right? But let's say I have a negative number, so -10, then we don't get any output here, right? So here we have, if this number is greater than 0, then do this, but we haven't specified what to do if it's not greater than 0, right? So that we will introduce later with an else statement. So also, if number is, let's say 0, then it's not greater than 0, so it doesn't give you any, so it doesn't print this thing, right? So you can also check it here, that since the number here right now has a value 0, so if you say number is greater than 0, then it will return you false. Okay, so it's quite straightforward. So you can just check if a number is negative or not for your exercise. So Python, I would suggest, like, it's more of a thing to learn by doing it. So as we go along this thing, just try different things. So here you can just to try it out. So if number is less than 0, then print the number is negative. Okay, so that's an example. So let's look at another example. So let's say we are building an operating system or something like that, and we want to check if a user is logged in or not. Okay, so we create a variable here, so is logged in. Okay, so if, so this is a Boolean variable, so either it will be false or true, right? Either true or false. So I just write here if is logged in, right? So if this will be true, then I want to print welcome user, right? So this is just a simple example, right? And yeah, so if this is true, then it will print welcome user. But now let's say if this is logged in is false. Okay, so if I just copy the example here, so instead of true, if this thing is false. Okay, so if this thing is false, then we haven't really specified what to do here, right? So it doesn't print out anything. So what we can do is, if this is true, then print welcome user, and we can give another condition here, that else. Okay, so if this is not true, then what to do, right? Then we just print welcome guest. Okay, so welcome guest. Okay, so now what happens is that here is logged in is false, so it first checks whether it is true or false. So here it finds that this is false, so it does not execute this statement, so it goes to else, and then here it finds out it has to print welcome guest, so it just prints out welcome guest. So it's quite straightforward. So next we will, now it's just about doing different examples. So next what we want to check is, let's say we have a number and we want to check whether it is positive, meaning greater than 0, or it is negative, less than 0, or it is equal to 0. Okay, so for this what we can do is that let's say we have number is equal to 10. So what we want to do is, if our number is greater than 0, then we print that the number is positive, right? So if, let's say, the number is not greater than 0, so what can it be? Either it can be equal to 0 or it can be less than 0, right? So there are like two different conditions. So if you just have like else, then it will be like, if this is not true, then do this. But we can have like multiple else statements. So one is, if the number is greater than 0, then print the number is positive. If, or else if the number is less than 0, then print the number is negative. Or else if the number is 0, then print 0, right? So we can have different conditions. So for that, what we write is elif, so which means that if this condition is not true, then check for this condition, right? So this checks for whether the number is less than 0, and if the number is less than 0, then print the number is negative. Okay, so if the number is greater than 0, then it does this. Else if the number is less than 0, then the number then it prints this, right? So we can check if the number is 10, then it just prints number is positive, and if it's, let's say, -5, then it prints the number is negative. But we haven't mentioned one condition, which, let's say, if the number is 0, then what happens? Then it prints nothing, right? So we can have an else for that particular condition. So else, so the number is neither greater than 0 nor less than 0, so meaning that the number is equal to 0. So we can print that the number is 0. Okay, so now we have all these three different conditions. So now you can make it a bit more interactive. So let's say you ask for an input from the user. Okay, so number is equal to input, enter a number, right? Enter a number. So you ask from the user to enter a particular number, right? So if you run this, then you get something here like enter a number. So I just enter 5 and then I press enter. So if you check the value of number, then you get it as 5. But one thing you have to be careful is that if you check the type of this variable, then you'll get it as a string. Okay, so by default it takes whatever you enter as a string. So if we want to treat it as a number, so we will convert it into an integer for here now. So we are assuming that we are just entering integer. Okay, so number, integer, input, enter a number. Okay, so now if we run this, then it asks for an input. So now if I enter 5, then if I check for number, then we have the number 5, and if we check for the type, then we have this integer. Okay, so we have this number, we are asking the user to input the number, and then we just paste this particular logic here. Okay, so if the number is greater than 0, then print the number is positive. If it's less than 0, negative, 0, then 0. So if I run this block of code, it again asks for a number. So if I enter 35, then 35 is greater than 0, so it printed the number is positive. Okay, so if I run this one more time, let's say I enter a negative, -10, then it will give me the number is negative. Okay, so this thing is like, yeah, what you can try in your Jupyter notebook, but simultaneously what I would suggest is that also create a .py file, and already from now get a habit of running the .py file. So I will just make a new .py file here. So let's say I just call it as tutorial2.py, right? And here I can just copy paste this block of code from here that we wrote there. So number, so it asks for a number, and then you enter whatever number, and then it checks and prints, right? And as I said in the beginning, it's always good habit to write comments. So here we can write program to check if the number is positive, negative, or 0. Okay, so I save this particular .py file, and now I will just open a terminal. I think I already have a terminal. Yeah, I mean, so there are different ways to execute this particular program. So one, you can just open an integrated terminal here. So if you just right click here and open an integrated terminal, then you will be inside this particular folder here, and you will open the terminal, right? So I can just write Python and the name of this file. So tutorial2. Okay, so tutorial2.py. So if I run this, then it asks for it asks me to enter a number. So let's say I enter -100, then it prints out the number is negative, right? So again, to rerun this program, you can just press up button, so it just gives you back the code that you have. And if you rerun this, then it again asks for your number. So you can, let's say 76, then the number is positive, right? And here you see like enter a number, and then here we don't have a space. So this thing you can just change here, that you just press space. So now if you rerun this program, and this time let's say I will just show you from the terminal. So here you can either open a terminal here itself in Visual Studio Code, or you can have your usual terminal, and here you can run the same file, right? So Python tutorial2.py. Okay, so now it asks for a enter a number, and it also has a space here. Okay, so if I enter 0 and I enter, then the number is 0. Okay, so you can try different things. So again, I enter 87, then the number is positive. Okay, so this is how we normally do it. And for now, let me just close this particular terminal here. And yeah, so now it's mostly about practicing different kinds of questions or problems. So let's say I want to check if a number is even or not. Okay, so for that, what would you do? So let's say if I have a particular number is 5. So if a number is even, then what happens? Then if you divide that number by 2, then it should give you a remainder 0, right? So that will be an even number. And if it doesn't give you 0, then it will be an odd number. Okay, so in Python, the way you divide and you check for the remainder is, you can check here. So let's say 5, I want to divide by 2, then you use this percentage sign. So 5 divided by 2, and this will give you a remainder of 1, right? Because 2 times 2 is 4, so you'll get a remainder of 1. So now this we can execute it here, that if the number divided by 2, or the remainder of this, so if this is equal to 0, right? So if you want to compare a particular thing to the other thing, then we use 2 equal to sign. So what it does is that it takes this quantity and compares whether it's equal to 0 or not, right? So if this is equal to 0, then print the number is even, right? And if this is not true, so if the remainder is not 0, then you can just print that the number is odd. Okay, so if it will check this number, if it's divisible by 2, it prints even, else it will print odd, right? So in this case, since 5 divided by 2 is not 0, so it will give you, yeah, so this condition will be false, so it will print out the number is odd, right? So there are different kinds of operators that you can have. So one is less than, right? Okay, so I'll just go through it quickly. So different kinds of operators, so I'll first just mention it here in the comments. So less than, greater than, okay, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and whether it is like equal to, right? And or it is not equal to. So let's briefly go through all of these different comparison operators. So less than sign, as it says, so if this particular number here, 5 is less than 2, right? So 5 is less than 2, it's not true, right? So 5 is not less than 2, so it will give you false, right? But let's say we had something like -4. So -4 is less than 2, so yeah, it gives you true. Okay, so I will just write here different examples. So -4 less than 2, it's true, so it's a operator to compare if it is less than. So if you want to check something is greater than, so let's say 5 is greater than 3, right? So 5 is greater than 3, so it should give you true, so you will get true, right? So here it's like for this operation you get this particular result, right? True. And for this particular operation you get this particular result here, right? So if I, let's say, change this thing, so let's say I have 2 is greater than 3, right? So 2 is not greater than 3, so this should give me false, and I get a false here, right? Similarly, we have this less than or equal to. So as the name here says less than or equal to, so either it can be less than or it can be equal to, right? So in both cases, this you will get true. So let's say I say 2 is less than or equal to 3, right? So 2 can be either less or it can be equal to 3, right? So 2 is less than 3, so it will give me true, right? So 2 is less than 3, it will give me true. But if I, let's say, do 4 is less than or equal to 3, so 4 is neither less than nor equal to 3, so it will give me false, right? But if I check 3 is less than or equal to 3, then 3 is not less than, but it is equal to, right? So either it has to be less than or it has to be equal to, right? So 3 is equal to 3, so that's why you get true, right? And similarly for greater than or equal to, what we have is that 5 has to be either greater than or equal to, right? So if you compare 5 and 3, so 5 is greater than 3, so this should give you true, right? Whereas let's say I have some 2, right? So 2 is neither greater than nor equal to 3, right? So it will give you false, right? And if I just check for 3, so 3 is not greater than 3, but 3 is equal to 3, right? So either it has to be greater or equal, so you will get true this time, right? And similarly for this one, so it checks whether two numbers are equal or not. So 5 is equal to 3, so 5 is not equal to 3, that's why you get false, right? And if you have 3 is equal to 3, then you will get true, right? And this last one is not equal to, so if you say 5 is not equal to 3, right? So 5 is not equal to 3, so it will give you true. And if you have 3 is not equal to 3, so this is false, because 3 is equal to 3, so you will get false. Okay, so these are different kinds of comparison operators that you can use to write your different conditions. Okay, so, and since we have written a little logic here for the odd or even number, so we'll just add this feature to our program. Okay, so let's say I just add it here. So if number divided by 2 is 0, then so here I just add a comment, check if the number is even or odd. Okay, so let's just run this. So I'll just open an integrated terminal here, and here Python tutorial 2.py, right? So it asks me to enter a number, so I enter 54. So what it does is that first it executes these line of codes, right? So it checks whether 54 is greater than 0, right? So if 54 is greater than 0, so the number is positive, right? And so these block of code is completed now, right? And then it goes on and it says, it sees that there is another if else, right? So if number mod 2, so if the result of the division by 2, if it's 0, then the number is even. So if you divide 54 by 2, then you will get remainder 0, so you get the number is even, right? So we can check one more time that, let's say I just run this program and I enter 57. Okay, so now what do you get? If you enter 57, then the number is positive, but now you get the number is odd. Okay, and so on. So you can just do, for the sake of it, so I'll just clear the outputs here, and let's say I rerun the program and I enter -6, right? So this time what would you get? So first it checks whether if the number is greater than 0, so the number is not greater than 0. It checks if the number is less than 0, so -6 is less than 0, then you get the number is negative, right? And here it checks -6 divided by 2, so you'll get a remainder of 0, so you print it as even, right? So you can combine different logics into a particular program. Okay, so now what you could do is, like, what we are checking here as two different things, we can combine both of these things into just one, right? So what we want to do is that, so let's say if a number is positive and even, right? So let's say we have number is equal to 6. So what we want to check is that if the number is greater than 0 and okay, so these are the logical operators that we can do. So this is what I had also discussed in our last lecture, that we have and or not. So if the number is greater than 0 and the number is also divisible by 2, right? So if you divide the number by 2, then you will get 0. So if both of these are true, then what we want to do is that we want to print that the so if the number is greater than 0 and number mod 2 is equal to 0, so what I want to print is that print the number is positive, right? So number is greater than 0, so it is positive and even, right? So if we divide by 2, then we are getting 0 remainder, so the number is positive and even, right? And then we can try different logics here. So let's say if the number is, so you can combine different things, that if the number is greater than 0 and number mod 2, let's say, is not equal to 0, right? So then what happens, the number is positive and print the number is positive and odd. Okay, so these are like different conditions that you can combine. Okay, so if I just run this, then if you enter 6, then you get the number is positive and even, and if you run 7, then you get the number is positive and odd. Okay, so you can combine different conditional operators into one particular logic. Okay, so with these things, you can create different kinds of interactive program as well. So different kinds of fun thing. So let's say I just want to create a simple game kind of thing. So I have, let's say, a secret number, and you need, or you or the user, whoever is playing that game, needs to guess that particular number, right? So let's say I set my secret number, which I know it as, so this is a very simple game. So secret number is 7. And you ask for an input from the user. Okay, so guess the particular number. So guess and input, right? So you ask for an input from the user and you say guess the number, right? You guess the number, and now what you want to do is that if whatever the number user entered, so if that is equal to your secret number, then you print, okay, like you guess the correct number, and if not, then you guess the correct number. And if not, then you can say that, yeah, the number was not correct, right? So let's say if guess is equal to our secret number, then what we can do is that we can print congratulations, you have guessed the correct number. Okay, and if the number is not equal to your secret number, then you can say that else print sorry, that's not the right number. Okay, so you can just create like this simple game, and if you run this, then it will ask user to guess the number, and you enter a number. So let's say I enter 9, and then you get the output that sorry, that's not the right number, right? So for this, I'll just create a simple program, or I'll just add the code here to our main program. So I'll add a comment. So guess the secret number. Okay, so I'll just add, and I'll comment out all of these line of codes. So, and to make the game a bit simpler, so guess the number, and I can say that the number is between whatever 1 to 9. Okay, so the number between 1 to 9, so you have to guess the number between that. Okay, so now if I make this game here and if I run this particular program, so python tutorial2.py, so it will ask me to guess a number and guess a number between 1 to 9. So I, as someone who has developed this program, so I know what the correct number is, but the user who plays it does not know. So if you enter 5, then yeah, sorry, that's not the right number. And yeah, you can just keep doing it. If you enter 1, it's not the right number. And if you finally enter 7, then yeah, congratulations, you have guessed the correct number, right? So this is a kind of simple program that you write. So I would suggest you to keep playing more with these things. So here I'll just give you 3 different exercise questions which you can try to do and try to implement on your own. So what we want to do is, as an exercise, so the first exercise is write a program that checks if a year is leap year or not, right? So by leap year, so a leap year has 366 days. So you need to create a logic so that the user enters a year, and then you need to check whether it is leap year or not. Okay, so the exercise 2 is write a program that determines the type of a triangle based on its side lengths. So you would have studied, so if the lengths of all the 3 sides of a triangle are equal, then you have the equilateral triangle. If 2 of the sides are equal, then you have isosceles triangle, or if none of the sides are equal, then it's scalene triangle. So that's the second exercise. And the third exercise is write a program that asks the user for their age and prints whether they are a child, teenager or adult. Okay, so you can decide like how do you classify as teenager or adult or a child. So what's the criteria, age criteria, and according to that you can say whether they are a teenager or a child or an adult. So these are the 3 exercises that you can try to do. Okay, so just pause the video and try to do on your own. And yeah, so first try to do it on your own, and then you can come here for a solution. Okay, so I hope you tried it. So try to do it on your own, that's more fun. But yeah, let's just go through the solution quickly here. So I'll just copy the code here so that I'll just explain what's the logic. So for keeping the time under control, so for age, so let's say we start with exercise 3, right? So a program that asks the user for their age and prints whether they are a child, teenager or adult, right? So first, in order to get the input, so you'll write age is equal to input, right? So you are asking the user to input age, and then you check for the logic. So if the age is less than 13, then you say, so that's your criteria, that if it is less than 13, then it's a child. If it's greater than 13 but less than 20, then you are a teenager, or else that means that you are greater than 20, so you are an adult, right? So these are the 3 different conditions that you have. So if I run this, then it asks me to enter an age. So let's say I enter 53, then you get you are an adult, right? So this you can again just go back to your program, right? And you can paste your code here, and these part I'll just comment it out, right? And just to check, so I will run this program again. And yeah, so enter your age. So if I enter, let's say 12, then I get you are a child, right? Because this condition says true. And if I rerun this, and if I enter 65, then I'll get you are an adult. And if I rerun this and I enter something like 19, then I get you are a teenager, right? So this is how you execute it. For exercise 2, write a program that determines the type of a triangle based on its side lengths, right? So here, what would you do? You would ask the user to enter the side lengths for the 3 sides of the triangle, and then first you check if all the 3 sides are equal, then it will be an equilateral triangle. For isosceles, what you do is you can check either side 1 is equal to side 2, or side 1 is equal to side 3, or side 2 is equal to side 3. Then print isosceles triangle, and if not, then print that it is scalene triangle. So I'll again copy paste the solution here. So you are asking for the input from user, and now we will do it as a float, right? So the side length need not be an integer, so it can be like 4.5, 5.5 or whatever. So we are treating it as a float, right? So side 1, side 2, side 3, and first we check it if it is an equilateral triangle, right? So if all the three sides are equal, then we'll print it as equilateral triangle. And if all the three sides are not equal, then we'll check either side 1 is equal to side 2, or side 1 is equal to side 3, or side 2 is equal to side 3, right? So if the two sides are equal, then we print it as isosceles triangle, and if not, then we print it as the scale-in triangle. Okay, this also I will put it into our program, and we will run this particular. So this I'll just comment out, right? So I'll just write here. So this one was for exercise 3, right? So this one was for exercise 3, and this one is for exercise 2. Okay, so if I run this now, right? So first let me just clear this, and if I run this, then first it ask me for side 1 length, right? So first let's say I will just enter 5.5, second side also I'll enter 5.5, third side is also 5.5, then all of these three are equal, so we get equilateral triangle. Okay, so next I run once more, I check, first one is like, let's say 3.3, second is 4, third one is again 3.3, so two sides are equal, so we get isosceles triangle. Okay, and if none of them are equal, so let's say 4, 6, 7, then we get it as scale-in triangle. Okay, so this is how we can check for the triangle type. So now for the third part, to check whether the year is a leap year or not, the logic is a bit complicated, so you might have to think it through, but I'll try to explain. So let's say I first just show you the code, it will be easier to explain. So let's say I ask user for an input. So the logic is that if the year is divisible by 4, okay, then it may or may not be a leap year. Okay, but if it's not divisible by 4, then it certainly is not a leap year. Okay, so let me just build this up slowly. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if the year is divisible by 4, okay, so then we will have to see, like, it may or may not be a leap year, but if it's not divisible by 4, right? So if it's not divisible, so I will write some line of codes here, but if it's not divisible by 4, then it's certainly not a leap year. Okay, so here we can use something called as f string. So in f string, what you can do is, like, you can display your variable. So year is not a leap year. Okay, so f string is very simple. It just takes this variable value and then it prints it out. Okay, so you will see what happens. So if the year is divisible by 4, then it may or may not be leap year, but if it's not divisible by 4, then it will certainly not be a leap year. So this thing we are done with, right? So now if a year is divisible by 4, then what we need to check is if the year is also divisible by 100. Okay, so if the year is divisible by 4 and if the year is divisible by 100, then again it may or may not be leap year. But if it is divisible by 4 and if it is not divisible by 100, then it will be a leap year. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if it's divisible by 4 and if the year is divisible by 100, then it may or may not be leap year. But if it's not divisible by 100, right, then it will certainly be a leap year. Okay, so this year is a leap year. Okay, so you can just Google this part, like how do we what's the logic for the leap year. So it's like, if it's not divisible by 4, it's not a leap year. If it's divisible by 4 and it's not divisible by 100, then it's certainly a leap year. But now if the number is divisible by 4 and it is also divisible by 100, then what we need to check is that if the number is also divisible by 400. So if the number is divisible by 400, then it is a leap year, else it is not a leap year. Okay, so inside this, so if the number is divisible by 100, then we need to check if the number is also divisible by 400. Okay, so if this is true, then we will print that the year is a leap year. Okay, and if the number is not divisible by 400, then we will print that the year is not a leap year. Okay, so I hope you get the logic. If not, then just try to go through it once more. And it's also like if you draw this diagram by pen and pencil in a paper, so if you can draw different branches and then first just explain the logic to yourself and just explain the logic in terms of a diagram and then try to execute it. So the way it's happening is that you are asking for user for a particular input year. So if the year is divisible by 4, then it may or may not be a leap year. But if the number is not divisible by 4, then it will certainly not be a leap year. Okay, so this is the first part. So if the number is divisible by 4, then it may or may not be leap year, but if it's not divisible by 4, then it is not a leap year. Okay, that's done. So now we need to get inside this particular world, that if the number is divisible by 4, then what you need to check is if the number is divisible by 100, then again it may or may not be leap year. But if the number is not divisible by 100, then it's certainly a leap year, right? So if a number is divisible by 4 and it's not divisible by 100, then it is a leap year. Okay, and now we get inside this world that if the number is divisible by 4 and the number is divisible by 100, then what we need to check is that if the number is divisible by 400, then it will be a leap year, and if it's not divisible by 400, then it will not be a leap year. Okay, so this is the whole logic, and this will be very easily explained in terms of a picture. So just to explain the logic once more, in terms of a picture, sorry for the bad writing, but I think it will be easier. So sometimes it's easier to just draw it and then execute the logic accordingly. So here what we are doing is, if the year is not divisible by 4, then it will not be a leap year. Okay, so this is the thing what we wrote here, that if year is not divisible by 4, so here we are checking if it's divisible by 4, and if it's not divisible by 4, then it goes into the else, right? So it is not a leap year. So this is like the end of this particular branch here, right? So this you can just write, you reach to a conclusion that it's not a leap year, so it's not a leap year. Now, if it's divisible by 4, then it may or may not be leap year, right? So then what's the condition is that if it's divisible by 4, and then if it's not divisible by 100, right, then it will be a leap year. So if it's divisible by 4 and if it's not divisible by 100, then it will be a leap year. Okay, and if we are inside this, that if it's divisible by 4, then it may or may not be it's divisible by 4 and it's divisible by 100, then it may or may not be a leap year. So if it's also divisible by 400, then it will be a leap year. So that is what you have here. If it's divisible by 400, then it's a leap year, and if it's not divisible by 400, then it is not a leap year. Okay, then it is not a leap year, and that is what we have here, that it is not a leap year. Okay, so I think it's easier to understand if you just draw it down. And yeah, hopefully you got the logic that we are trying to do here. And just to check, so we can run this particular program, and Python tutorial 2, so enter a year. So let's say I enter 400. Okay, so 400 is a leap year. So what it checked first was where is 400 divisible by 4? So yes, so it will come inside this. Is 400 divisible by 100? So it will come inside this, right? And yes, this is also true, it is divisible by 100. Then it will check if whether it is divisible by 400, and then yeah, it's also divisible by 400, so it will give you as a leap year. Okay, and then if you check for another example, so let's say I enter something as 200. Okay, so 200 is not a leap year. So what happens here is that 200 is divisible by 4. So yes, it is divisible by 4. It checks whether it's divisible by 100. So yes, it's divisible by 100, but then it checks whether it's divisible by 400. So 200 is not divisible by 400, so you'll get that 200 is not a leap year. Okay, and you can check for one more. So let's say I just enter 473, and this one 473 is not divisible by 4, so you'll get directly as not a leap year, right? So you can check for different numbers. And yeah, so I think that's it for today. So we have understood how to use if else condition, and also in multiple types of, so if else and so on, and also have like these complex logics here. And yeah, so it's more about practicing. So the more you practice, the better you will get, and you can have different questions that you try it on, right? And in the next lecture now, we will go through loops and iterations. So how to use for loops, how to use while loops. So the example that we did here, so let's say the guessing number, so until you guess it right, you just keep repeating it, right? So how do we do that in a loop? Or we want to print something many different number of times, so how do we use that loops or iteration? So that we will do it in the next video. So yeah, thanks a lot, and see you in the next video. Thank you.